Excuse me, I'm Eric Lensher.
Sounds Xavier.
Go fuck yourself.
Retail action figures have come a long way over the past decade. Previously, if you were to ask someone which is better between a retail figure and a higher-end one, odds are they'd tell you the higher-end one is better without even batting an eye. And this isn't because retail releases were bad, but compare Hasbro's version of Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man in 2014 to Medicom's Mafex release during the same year, and you can immediately see the difference in quality. The past few years, though, have seen major strides taken in toy engineering, with companies like Jada Toys, Jazzwares, and yes, Hasbro greatly improving the quality of their figures. In Hasbro's case, this is probably best shown with the Retro Spider-Man, a complete overhaul of their Spider-Man that brought it closer to what Medicom was doing with their Mafex figures. Needless to say, people loved it. It's a fantastic improvement of what was already a pretty good Spider-Man body. It was so good, in fact, that the Marvel Legends team used it as a basis for their new female body, which we first saw with their Black Widow, and we're seeing it as a basis again for the figure we're going to be talking about today. The Marvel Legends 85th anniversary Astonishing Wolverine. Before we get started properly, can I just say how much I like the new packaging? I'm one of the few people who actually like the windowless packaging, especially when they had custom artwork for it. But a lot of people understandably didn't, and I think if they had to bring the windows back, this was the nice way to do it. Especially because they're much more compact than previously, which just makes storing them a lot easier. But enough talk about boxes, let's get to the thing you actually came here to see. So this figure of Logan is based on the promotional version of his design from the 2006 run of Astonishing X-Men. This design was also used for Marvel vs. Capcom 3, and was the basis for Hugh Jackman's costume in Deadpool and Wolverine. Hey, that just came out recently, didn't it? How topical. Now, I said promotional version, so what's the difference between that and the comics version? The yellow rectangles on his boots and gloves. And that's it. Look, it's a difference that I don't really think will affect whether you should buy this or not, but it is a noticeable difference, so I felt the need to point it out. Regardless, this is a great looking Wolverine. All the details are nicely done, and the paint is really well applied, although not perfect. I have a bit of paint bleed on the underside of his arms, and the hairs on the underside of his arms are missing. Not the worst thing in the world, but it is still an issue. This head sculpt, though, isn't an issue. It is fantastic. Here's the X-Men 97 Logan head for comparison. I like that one too, but I do kind of prefer this one. Far more subdued and realistic. I don't know, it's working for me a lot better. Though, of course, a costumed Logan should be wearing his head, so let's just pop that on there, and there we go. Masked Wolverine. Looking just as good as the regular head sculpt, seems to have a bit more of a stubble, which is odd, but whatever. And since we're on the heads anyway, let's look at the rest of the accessories. Alongside the masked head, Logan obviously comes with two fists with his claws popped out, and man, do I love the way these claws look. Super thick, much better than the 97 versions, which are far slimmer. They're also easy to remove, so hey, if you want to put in some custom claws, it should be no problem. Obviously, you also get another set of fists without the claws, but more interestingly, you get a splayed out right hand and a pointing left hand. Now typically, Marvel Legends only pack in one extra set of hands alongside an extra head, so giving Logan these is quite surprising, especially because they can't be reused. These are exclusive to him due to the molding. Do I wish these were a matching set? Kind of, but I'm most certainly not going to complain about what we got here. It's extra options for posing, and I greatly appreciate it. Speaking of posing, let's get to the big change between this guy and previous Wolverine figures, the articulation. Now, for the most part, every joint on here either has increased range or has remained the same. Elbows, knees, butterflies, ankle rockers, you name it. But the big game changer is the diaphragm joint. Gone is the antiquated ab crunch waist swivel combo, and what we have here is a system that not only looks more natural, but also provides more range, if only slightly. Either way, this Wolverine is a dream to pose, and it's super fun to get him into incredibly dynamic poses. However, there is one, just one, point of articulation where the previous figures do it better. The head. Let's break this down. Traditionally, Marvel Legends head joints are what is known as a ball hinge joint, which, for those unfamiliar, is simply a ball joint connected to a disc hinge. While this doesn't necessarily look the most natural, it does provide a great range of movement, especially when looking up or down. Our new Wolverine uses what is known as a dumbbell joint instead, and yes, a dumbbell joint is exactly what it sounds like. This sounds like a good idea, but the joint just doesn't have enough space in the neck to move, and as a result, you get nowhere near the amount of range that the disc hinge does. What's really strange though is that the Marvel Legends team has shown that they are aware of this problem. Remember the retro Spider-Man figure I mentioned earlier? That guy has a cutout at the back of the neck for more range. It's not a perfect fix by any stretch of the imagination, look at that gap there, but it did help, and it's odd that it didn't do anything like that here. For a much better alternative though, I'd like to show you the Jada Toys Ryu. Now this guy doesn't just have a dumbbell joint at the top of his head, but a ball joint at the base of the neck as well. This is actually similar to the setup that Medicom uses for the Mafex line, and not only does it look more natural, but it gives far greater range than either of these two options. Hopefully in future the Legends team will try this system out, but for now Logan's head joint is fine, but far from ideal. And seeing as how we have Ryu out here now, let's do some size comparisons. At just under 15 centimeters, Logan's a bit taller than previous versions. He'll still work fine with Marvel Legends and figures of that size, but good luck getting him to work with SH Figuarts, he is way too tall. For context, in order for Wolverine to properly scale with SH Figuarts figures, he'd have to be smaller than Vegeta. Yeah. Of course, if you don't mind Wolverine being tall, this is a non-issue, and given that he's not made for this line, I didn't expect him to scale to begin with, but I still felt it was worth mentioning. Overall though, what problems we do have here are relatively minor. This new Wolverine is still an absolute knockout of a figure. Thank goodness too, as while I don't think the old body is being retired just yet, sooner or later this guy will be the base for all future Wolverine figures, so thank goodness there aren't any major glaring problems with it. Whether you're a fan of Astonishing X-Men, Marvel vs. Capcom 3, or some other thing this design showed up in, I'd recommend picking him up when you can. Hopefully this new articulation scheme or something better is adapted into other Marvel Legends bodies like the Vulcan one in the future. But that's all I've got to say for today, so until next time, later.